Welcome to Lynn Cullen Live. Talk radio without the static. Email your questions and comments to lynncullenshow@gmail.com. And now your host, Lynn Cullen.
Hey, how you doing? Ay, ay, ay. I gotta tell you what, our life expectancy just dropped some more. I'm talking about Americans. I didn't see the exact number is what I think according, if I'm an average kind of person, I got about a year and a half left. I'm toast. My brother's already supposed to be dead. God knows my mother is. And August is gone. August, you got like about 14 hours left. That's it, babe. And you're toast too. Speaking of that, I swear I saw something. Maybe I can find it before we get to some serious stuff that's going on. I swear I saw something that said meteorological. Get it? Here. The Weather Service put this out. Tomorrow is the last day of meteorological summer. This came out yesterday. So what do you mean What do you mean meteorological summer? I forget when summer's. Oh, geez. Oh, God. Sorry. My son was just texting me, and it looks like he's angry. God! I think he's telling me not to say anything about him. Whoops. Uh-oh. All right. So, here we go. Meteorological. What does that mean? It means that if you're a meteorologist, summer ends today and September is the beginning of fall. I mean, in my head, I sort of think that way. Fall, September, October, November, right? But it's not the scientific. I don't understand it. Okay, doesn't matter. First, before we get into some, to me, the huge story and the emblematic story that is not getting, I don't know, as usual, I did not get my paper today, but I saw the PG, I don't think it's on the front page of the PG, we've got an American city of 170,000 people that has no potable water. The drinking water, not even just the drinking water pressure, drinking water is gone. Jackson, Mississippi. Happens to be a state capital as well, Mississippi. And of course, when something like this happens to an American city, it suggests something. It suggests malfeasance of government, I'll tell you that. Because from the sound of this is not a quick fix thing. You've got 170,000 people who have no access to water right now. That's a city with hospitals. Their water ain't working either. Hospital, nursing homes, schools. Schools finished. Back to virtual learning where kids can sit in their houses with no water. Inability to flush a toilet. Jackson, Mississippi is a classic example of America's disintegration and America's racism and American refusal to do anything other than react. There's not a lot of looking ahead in America. We wait for catastrophe and then react. Cities all over this country have ailing and probably, well, could be failing infrastructure. That's like pipes that carry water. Pittsburgh's no exception there. We've been trying. We're trying. And the thing is, this costs tons and tons of money. And we live in a country now where no politician can get elected if he says, we got to raise taxes because we need money for like basic stuff. This is like money not to buy a fancy something, bauble that you don't need. This is money to literally buy shelter, food. Pittsburgh was emblematic of the disintegration of this country's infrastructure earlier this year when the Fern Hollow Bridge went. But Jackson, Mississippi, that's the largest city in that state. And that state is a red state. It's run by Republicans, white Republicans, who come to Jackson and sit in the state capitol and refuse to help. They starve that city. It's 80% black. So lots of luck to them. Having all kinds of infrastructure issues for Jackson, Mississippians is business as usual. They're used to all of a sudden being told, oh, you got to boil your water for a week or so here. But this, nothing quite like this. And I don't know, what the hell do you do? 170,000 people? Think about it. Think if it were your own life. Think about just basic needs of sanitation. And speaking of sanitation, in Jackson, Mississippi, garbage pickup is like off and on too. This is a poor city. Whites fled to the suburbs, and they fled with their money, which means the tax base shrunk. You have a city full of poor black folks who do not have the resources. And all of it is steeped in racism. There is no getting around it. You know, the friggin' governor of Mississippi held an emergency meeting about this. I believe this was on Monday. And he didn't even invite the mayor of the city, Mayor Lumumba. No, he was not invited. How do you even, how? I mean, right there it is. There it is. And the mayor, not wanting to antagonize the racist governor any further, said, we are very grateful for any help the state can give us. We've been going it alone for a long time. We are in a constant state of emergency. The roads are crumbling. This is America. So yesterday somebody said, yeah, but don't you feel proud when you come back to America from someplace else? And I said, nah, because you come back to America and you see our roads are in awful repair. Our so-called public utilities are in awful repair. Our infrastructure, our bridges, our airports, God. Our railways? What railways? I'm just saying. I mean, they've got to call in the friggin' National Guard. What are they doing? I haven't seen news today, so I don't know. But this is such a huge emergency. Water. And of course, what's fascinating about this is the thing that apparently put it all over the top was this deluge. They've been just being deluged by Mother Nature. So it's that classic situation of water everywhere, but not a drop to drink. So all of the rain and the flooding overwhelmed their system. And that's another example. Global warming, climate change, resulting in these new weather patterns that create this kind of havoc. You could say that what's happening in Jackson, Mississippi is part of what we were warned about decades ago, the kind of human suffering that would result because of global warming, but not really, because it wouldn't have if you had a non-racist functioning government. The only way you do that is get Republicans out of the picture, since they don't believe in government. They think government's the problem. Oh, all right. So I'm going to stop. It's getting me too agitated. I was sad when I heard yesterday that Mikhail Gorbachev had died. I'm in no position to pontificate about him and his place in history, but I feel pretty confident in saying there are few more consequential lives in the 20th century than his. And I also feel comfortable saying that I think he was a courageous man. I think he was a fascinating man. I think he was flawed. I think he was human. And yeah, I read that the George Kennan, does that name ring a bell? Sure does with me and always has. Somewhere in my schooling, in some political science class I took in college, we spent an awful lot of time on George F. Kennan. And I noted that one of the obits I read of Gorbachev mentioned Kennan, as they would have, since Kennan was the man who came up with the idea for the Western world. He was a diplomat. That we needn't worry about nuclear war between the Soviet Union and us. If we simply, we could, I think the policy was called containment. He sold America on this. That we could, in fact, take on the Soviet Union, not in a militaristic way. I mean, not by actually shooting anything. It did mean a big buildup of our military. But he said he's the one who sort of, I suppose, created the Cold War. What it would be. Yeah, not a hot one. We can do this with a Cold War. And it's generally believed that he was proved correct. The Soviet Union did fall. We never engaged in a hot war with them. And the Soviet Union came down. Now, Mikhail Gorbachev had a lot to do with that. Which is why in the obits I read on Gorbachev, I'd bump into Kennan every once in a while, who was quoted as he considered Mikhail Gorbachev, the word he used for him, a miracle. A miracle. Now, the reason I bring up Kennan again, because I was so blown away. Might have been 25 years ago, I don't know, when I was reading something about Kevin McClatchy, who, this young, boyish Californian who bought the Pittsburgh Pirates, and talking about the money he had coming from McClatchy newspapers. And then talking about his mother, whose maiden name was Kennan. And it turns out that George Kennan was Kevin McClatchy's grandfather, or Bumpa, as he called him. So this extraordinary man, who was, a centerpiece of world diplomacy and the creator of this successful containment policy, is Kevin, well, he's dead now, was Kevin McClatchy's grandfather. It's actually, it's a fascinating story about Kennan. He wrote an anonymous piece to Foreign Affairs magazine in 1947. So it's right after World War II, when our allies in that war, Soviet Union, became our immediate enemy after the war. And it was in this anonymous piece, which was supposedly written by Mr. X, that he proffered this idea of containment. And also suggesting that it was important for the United States to rebuild its alliances with. And I mean, think about it, how odd. How astonishing this is. We had just fought a war and won with the extraordinary help of the Soviet Union. World War II would never have been won without them. I think I would agree. And so this extraordinary ally of ours, Kennan said, clearly now our number one enemy. As soon as the war is done, they're our number one enemy. And he said, we need to just contain them. And to do that, we need to immediately make friends with our enemies from World War II. He writes this in 47. How outrageous. We gotta form an alliance with Japan, Germany, and the rest of Europe. We've got to do that to contain the Soviet Union, who helped save us from fascism. It's amazing. And anyway, he ended up selling that outlandish idea and it worked. McClatchy says his grandfather, he never, ever talked about his extraordinary life. He lived to be 101. He said, I came on a piece. I went looking after Gorbachev died, and I saw Kennan being, I Googled McClatchy Kennan and came up with a posted that article when McClatchy was saying, well, he said this: we were playing the Mets in New York, and I brought him down. So he says, hey, Gramps, you want to come down and see the game? And McClatchy said he pulled out a scorecard and started scoring the game. I don't know where he learned to do that, but it was typical of him. He was so analytical. He was charting every pitch. He was not a guy who could just sit around. So it's odd. It's odd. And Mikhail Gorbachev dies, and I start thinking about Kevin McClatchy and George F. Kennan, another man like Gorbachev, who is clearly one of the more consequential figures of the 20th century. Thank you, Milton. This is obviously necessary. Milton just told me President Biden has just signed an emergency declaration for Jackson, which will give them, money, federal money. You see, but this is what happens. We, the taxpayers of these red states that starve their own communities, especially their communities of color, so that these disasters happen. I don't know if I'm being overbroad by politicizing it like that, but I just, it's unbelievable. Just unbelievable. I happened to also, I looked up poor Gorbachev. I was shocked that he stayed in Russia. They hated him. I'm always surprised that they didn't kill him. They blamed him for destroying the Soviet Union, and that he stayed. I mean, on a personal level, it's sad what happened to him. He rose to such heights, and then in his own country, which he was trying desperately to help, he was seen as somebody who destroyed it. And I mean, to be humiliated to the point where in order to make money, he has to do he agrees to do a Pizza Hut commercial. Have you seen it? I just watched it again. Made me want to cry. I don't know. So when Ronald Reagan said, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall. Well, and it's also fascinating that those two guys grew to really like each other. And they had reason to. They helped each other. They helped each other do good things. And Gorbachev, he came to Reagan's funeral. He liked the guy. What a complicated man. What a complicated man. I don't know. I don't know. Okay, I just want to say this. I am really happy that our president, Joe Biden, has started to take on the Republicans, call them what they are, use the language that has to be used. Still not strong enough for me, but strong enough for the Republicans to all go berserk. The Biden, calling them semi-fascist, and I would just drop the semi. But I so appreciate it. And the strength of what he said, was it yesterday? About you can't be a law and order party and be also for insurrection. You can't be law and order party, pro law enforcement, and call the insurrectionists of January 6th patriots. Oh, he's taken it to him, and I love it. I came upon a piece in the Atlantic that I just think is smart as hell about the F word, fascism. A lot of people would say it's like one of those, it's a third rail. You don't go there. It just creates too much, It's unnecessary. It's not diplomatic. But I have been arguing for a few years now, it's the right word. What if that which isn't diplomatic happens to be pretty much exactly, walks like a duck, talks like a duck. I'm sorry, fascism. And a guy named Tom Nichols took this subject on. And if you don't mind, I'll read some of it to you. He talks about how there's fear of using the word because it's a Rubicon you don't want to cross because it makes our fellow Americans into essentially our civic enemies. But here again, if it walks like, what are we to do if that is in fact the reality? And that's where Tom Nichols, I think, pretty much agrees. He says we cannot let our understandable fear of words such as fascism scare us out of talking about the reality staring us in the face. The GOP might not meet the full definition of a fascist party, not yet, anyway. But it's not a normal party, and its base is not an ordinary political movement. Its base is instead a melding of the remnants of a once great party with an authoritarian, violent, seditionist personality cult bent on capturing and exercising power solely to benefit its own members and punish its enemies. Is that fascism? For most people, it's close enough. A would-be strongman and a party of followers, enveloped in racism, seized with nostalgia for an imagined glorious past, and drunk on mindless blood and soil nationalism, all stinks of fascism. He goes on to say, but there's a reason that we still need to be careful, because things are poised to get worse, and we need to know what to watch for. He says a fascist takeover relies on a disciplined and organized mass party led by dedicated people who, once they get power, zero in on destroying the mechanisms that could dislodge them from power. And that would be the courts, law, and competing parties. Now, from where we are now, as you look back at how important it was for Mitch McConnell and Trump to do nothing really more than pack the courts, pack the Supreme Court, which they were extraordinarily successful in doing, pack the federal courts. That's all they did. And so that even now, Trump, in his legal jeopardy, could be saved here and there because his pleas and his cases, every once in a while, yeah, they end up in the courtroom of somebody, as they are right now, who he put there. But because fascism, to make it, requires this disciplined and organized party, Nichols suggests we could really be in a better place than we think. Because he says, look, violent, tiki torch wielding nincompoops are dangerous. But a rabble is not a disciplined party. And these Ivy League Republican senators stumbling around in their 50-50 Senate are not the iron men of steel who can build a fascist state. That I don't know. He says this is why it's a mistake to assume that every group of howling weirdos wearing Trump capes and carrying bear spray are fascists. Some of these people are deluded, some are bored, and some are just idiots. If we build them into something more, we're not only missing the chance to pull some of them back, we're going to fail to spot the real ones hiding among them. I don't know about that. You know, he says these idiots jacked up on Fox News and talk radio flying fuck Joe Biden flags aren't necessarily fascists, but, and here's the but, they are the raw material of fascism. The battering rams that actual fascists, the cleverer and nimbler than the hapless, overgrown fools who will end up in front of a judge and going to jail. It's those nimbler, cleverer ones who will use them to knock down our institutions by goading them into violence, which is what we saw and are seeing. And he agrees it might seem like a distinction without a difference. He says something has definitely changed in American life. Trumpism, which has captured the base of the Republican Party, is authoritarian, anti-democratic, anti-constitutional, anti-American. But he also thinks that Trump's followers, while headed for fascism, just aren't organized enough and are incapable of organization. I don't know. But I find this all fascinating. He also goes on to say it is also important not to be overly distracted by Trump himself. Yeah, which we are again. We are in a pre-fascist interlude, but Trump himself is too incompetent, too lazy and selfish to lead an actual fascist movement. Well, yeah, absolutely. But Ron DeSantis ain't. And there are others quite willing to step up. Some of those Ivy League senators, for instance, and some governors. So what should really scare us, and this is where our attention needs to be, is watching out for those smarter, tougher, would-be authoritarian fascist leaders. Trump has paved the way for them. He's corroded the guardrails of the American system. He's normalized the kinds of rhetoric used by actual fascists. And he has convinced a whole bunch of Americans that mass violence is an okay alternative to the ballot box. And this guy ends with, we can prove him wrong, stop his threats in its tracks, stop this threat in its tracks. The time is growing short. Okay. Well, I really thought that was a pretty smart rundown of where we are. Is the caller still there? I'm sorry. I just saw I had it.
Morning.
Hello.
Hello. Hey,
Hi.
why does the Democrats just start taking a page out of Republican, and rename the Republican Party, and just call them the Fourth Reich? I mean, will that get anybody's attention? I mean, holy cow.
Well, I mean, there are those that do. I know lots of other names that people call them, but there's nothing we can do that is as clever as what they did, which is just losing our last two letters. So rather than call us the Democratic Party, they call us the Democrat Party. I mean, what are we? Wouldn't work to do the same to them, the Republic Party. Although I have to tell you, the Repugnant Party is probably the best, but you can't do that. I mean, it doesn't. And what good would it do? I mean, I don't know.
Well, I mean, the good thing. Well, I don't know. A good thing. Are people slowly waking up? Because I'm looking at what's going on in the state of Pennsylvania with Mastriano and Oz, and and what Maryland did with the Democrats pushing the crazy Republican, helping him get the nomination. If people finally think, oh, this is going way too far. I mean, I'm trying to be a little bit hopeful here,
Well, I mean, I think what is happening is exactly that people are waking up. And part of that is because people are starting to use the right language. And we're not tiptoeing around it anymore. So you have the president actually saying the Republican Party is a threat. The Republican Party is semi-fascist. That's important. And you have people in media that are stepping up more than they had. And also you have, in as much as most Americans pay attention, you have the Republicans who are feeling so full of, actually with Roe, with the ending of Roe, they're showing of their cruelty and what they really are dreaming of. Clarence Thomas's concurring decision in Dobbs, where he talks about we need to really revisit gay marriage and and contraception. I mean, these people would have us, back in the last top back 2 centuries. And as more people become aware of that, as more people living in these states where abortion is now illegal start seeing the very human results of this, it ain't going to help Republicans. It's why I have seen that there are all these stories about Republican candidates right now rubbing their sites of what they had said about abortion and other things. they know this abortion thing is hurting them. And some of them actually distancing themselves as much as they can from Trump. They do know Trump is hurting them. He's pulling the party apart, which is wonderful. So he and the court he created have gotten a lot of power and are doing with that power what they told us they would do. And Americans are waking up and saying, wait a minute.
Well, I think, there's one thing I always said, okay, fine. If Trump wants to tear apart the Republican Party, that's one thing. But if he wants to, but in the process destroys America, that's a whole other story. I guess it's just all sad to me because back in the day, I used to vote for Republicans, and I haven't for probably close to 20 years now because I just seem like we saw. But the big thing that really bothers me is, you see about like our infrastructure. You talked about the poor drinking water, especially in these red states. And it's like, if you're defunding all these necessary things just because you're just against things, you're not for anything. It always leads to the question like, how can anybody lead something they don't believe in? You know what I mean? It's like, well, I don't believe in government, so I'm going to run for
government,
senator.
But I want to be the president. Right. Yeah, exactly. Because they don't want government to do what Democrats think government is for. They want government. They want to. Well, they famously, it was said, starve it until we can drown it in a bathtub.
Yeah.
They don't believe in it. But in order to do that, you have to have the power to do it. So you have to be in the government and have the power to kill it.
But the result is like what we're seeing in Mississippi. It's and people can't tie the two together. Government is necessary to provide services to the constituents because we all are going to be in need at some point in time or another. So it's not an absolute evil, it's a necessity. And if you keep, it's like trying to run an ice cream store, but I don't believe in ice cream. Well, how good a manager are you going to be if you're running an ice cream store that you don't believe in? And that's what we got going on right now. I mean, well, it's a recipe for failure.
Okay, well, I would argue, though, that the Republican Party has changed from the party that, wants to starve government and totally. It's changed into this neo-fascist party. And fascists want government because they use it. They use it to, jackboot their constituents into where, whatever they want them to do. And you got to have that power. The Republicans seeking power now are all too often of that ilk. And the ones that their base seems to happily vote for, like a Mastriano, are just without, they don't even pretend that Mastriano is a white Christian nationalist, racist, anti-Semite, fascist. That's what he is. And wow, he just blew away the Republicans here in Pennsylvania. Well, that tells you something about your neighbors and makes you a little bit uncomfortable, to say the least. Hey, I got to run. Thank you.
Okay, good talking with you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Always good to talk to you. Thank you. I got so much stuff here. I don't know what to do with it all. Here's something good that's happening. Not getting a lot of media attention. You remember Dominion voting systems? Those are the guys who had done a lot of, made a lot of voting machines that worked really very well. But they're the ones that the Republicans decided to say had stolen the election. And Dominion ain't laughing. And as you know, they have lodged lawsuits against umpteen organizations, news organizations, and humans who promulgated and profited from that lie and helped to destroy faith in our voting system. And they've got one of the lawsuits is against Fox News. And they're coming at them. So today, I believe it is, Sean Hannity is going to be deposed by their lawyers. I believe Lou Dobbs is going to be deposed today. Earlier in the week, it was Tucker Carlson has already sat. He had to say he was going to tell the truth, and he's been deposed. And Dominion has said all of those people defamed Dominion by knowingly, falsely claiming that the company conspired to rig the election against Donald Trump. Now, I don't know, given the sort of leeway we give the free press in this country, but I don't know if Dominion can succeed. But boy, they must be scaring the bejeebers out of these jerks. They've also deposed producers there, bookers. They're looking to show that the internal culture and reporting practices of Fox so-called news shows a political goal that disregards facts. I mean, through Discovery, they've got tons of internal emails, text messages sent by Fox employees, and one of their filings apparently says that these messages show that Fox knew the lies it was broadcasting were false. Now, if they can prove that, they got a case. So I am so grateful to the people at Dominion who didn't just shake this off and move on, but are fighting these SOBs, these killers, would-be killers of democracy. They're going after Maria Bartiromo, too. She's not yet been scheduled for a deposition, but her day is coming. I believe even the Murdochs themselves, perhaps, they are leaving no stone unturned. At the very least, it's costing the Murdochs money. So there's that going on, and you should be, aware of it. What other stuff is going on that we should be aware of? Oh, I loved this story about Ukraine, which is, Ukraine is just, I decided to start paying more attention to Ukraine. You got these international nuclear people that are there to get to that power plant, which is right in the middle of the battlefield and is occupied by the Russians. And I don't know that they're in it yet. They're outside of it, but the fact that it's inside a battlefield, I don't know. There is real international concern that place has got to be secured, and that Putin is using it for essentially international blackmail. Oh, but this, I love the fact. So if you are, it's like in Vietnam, that war that some of us remember. This was the big bad United States of America, the greatest military ever. And we were fighting a bunch of guys wearing sandals with nowhere near our firepower. And how the hell are they going to possibly win, the guys with sandals? They did. They humiliated the big United States, sort of like the Afghans did to the, well, name them, the Brits, the Russians, us. It's what is guerrilla warfare. It is what, if you're outgunned, as the Ukrainians are, you have got to then outfox the others. So the Ukrainians now are the only way they win against this much, much, much larger military is to outthink them. And they've been doing a pretty damn good job. And they've been making very careful use of the weapons they have been given. And one of the weapons they've been given that has been a game changer of late is something from us. Let's see, what I want to get it right, what this is. It's a high mobility artillery rocket system. And it can fire, it can fire missiles from way far away and like hit targets that disrupt the Russians totally. So I think we gave them something like 12 or something. So they're pretty valuable. So you know what the Ukrainians immediately did? They built full-size replicas of these rocket systems that we gave them. From the air, they look exactly like it. Never mind, they're made of cardboard and duct tape. But they look like from the air. So when the Russians send their drones over, the drone has no ability to tell if it's real or not, looks exactly, has the exact shape, blah, 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 blah. The drone lets the Russians know where that extraordinarily expensive and deadly piece of equipment is, and the Russians send one of their huge cruise missiles in and blow it up. But all they're blowing up is cardboard. And apparently this is working really, really well. It's just little stuff like that. I thought, wow, how cool. How cool is that? I also came upon a story that I wanted to share with you. It's sort of awful. It's about a bunch of skulls. This is from the BBC. There was a bunch of skeletons found while some construction was being done for a shopping center. And this is, I don't know, somewhere outside of, I'm not sure what city it's close to, but in England. Oh, Norwich. And this was actually, these bones were discovered a long time ago. But research was being done on them because it was a mass grave and it was filled with people, mostly children. A mass grave of children. And it was dated back to about the 12th century. And they finally, I guess, research has been done, and they finally figured out exactly who these children are and who the people were, because they've been able to do DNA on some of the bones, especially the children. And they're saying the children are, many of them siblings, they're age 5 to 10. And they're Jews. So their DNA looked exactly like mine. Mine, I'm 99% Ashkenazi Jew. These guys were 100% Ashkenazi Jew. And so you got to ask, what the hell happened? I mean, Jews were always being slaughtered, but what happened? And the historical record is quite clear. There was a known massacre of Jews in Norwich in 1190 AD. As a matter of fact, they even know the date, February 6th, because it was written about. A guy named Ralph de Diceto in his, I don't know what, some strange thing he wrote. He recorded that on 6th February, all the Jews were found in their homes at Norwich and butchered. And what I haven't told you is that the people who butchered these children and threw them down a well, the bodies were found at the bottom of a well, were crusaders. And it made me think how perspective, we all perceive things in different ways. And it made me think of how most Christians perceive the Crusades. And I assure you that my perception as a Jew is quite different. So when I hear that rousing refrain, onward Christian soldiers, marching as to war with the cross of Jesus, right? Well, it is a stirring, militaristic anthem. There is no doubt about it. Must get Christian blood flowing. But those Christian soldiers massacred every Jew they came across. I think a lot of people think the Crusades, well, they just went down to the Holy Land, right, to get the Arabs out, the Muslims. Yeah, well, them too. So I just want you to know that when you think of the Crusades and the romanticizing of crusaders, Western culture sells. That as in so much so-called history, it ain't the whole truth. Nowhere near it. I'm glad at least that those terrorized dead children killed by good Christian soldiers, at least now, will get proper burial. 1,000 years late, perhaps, but better late than never. All right, that's it for me. I done did it. And I'll be back tomorrow. Man, enjoy this glorious day. I'm intending to, and I hope you can as well. Bye.
Lynn Cullen Live, Monday through Thursday from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. and archived at pghcitypaper.com. The opinions expressed on Lynn Cullen Live are those of the host and do not necessarily reflect the viewpoints of Pittsburgh City Paper or its advertisers.